Hello, and welcome to today's video, which is on algebraic expressions. So let's just jump straight into it. Okay, so we've got 125x to the power of 6 over 64 all to the power of a third. So what I would do is I would break it up into two separate parts, okay? What I would do first of all is maybe call the numerator, let's call that 1, and call the denominator 2. Just to break it up, and I think, because if you just look at that question holistically, just look at it overall, I think that's a bit daunting, especially if you're unsure about algebraic expressions. So let's just take it one bit at a time. So 125x to the power of 6 to the power of a third. Let's just deal with the numerator first. So what you could do is actually split these two parts up separately as well. So you could say 125 to the power of a third multiplied by x to the power of 6 to the power of a third. You could do that. So using your class whiz calculator, or not, you don't necessarily need the calculator for this. You should know that 125 to the power of a third is the same as the cube root of 125. Okay, you should know that, and you should know that that's 5. This one's slightly more difficult. That's why I put the picture of the laws of indices on the slide, just to remind you how to do this. Okay, so you've got x to the power of 6 to the power of a third. If you have the power outside the bracket and inside the bracket, what do? You multiply them together. So that would give you x to the power of 6 over 3. Okay, so we can take this a bit further. We can say the cube root of 125, as I said, should be 5. X to the power of 6 over 3 can be simplified to x squared. Okay, so that's the numerator dealt with. What about the denominator? So let's try that. So we've got, let's see, so we've got 64 to the power of a third. So similar to over here, that's the same as the cube root of 64, which again you can check in your calculator, but you should know the cube root of 64 is 4. Therefore, your final answer over here, 125x to the power of 6 divided by 64 all to the power of a third will be 5x squared divided by 4. And that's your answer. And I think that's more straightforward than just tackling it straight away. I think breaking it down, numerator first, then the denominator, and then bring it together is the best way to do it. Okay? All right, let's look at the next question. So we've got 2x to the power of half all to the power of 3 all over 4x squared. Okay, so similar to the last question, let's take the numerator first. Okay, so we'll call that 1, and there's not much to do with the second one. I'll call it 2 anyway, but there's 4x squared is just on its own. There's not much else you can do with that. But just for consistency, we'll just call the numerator 1 and denominator 2. Okay, so 2x to the power of a half cubed. So that means, like the last question, you can split the 2 and the x to the power of a half up separately. So I would say that's 2 cubed multiplied by x to the power of a half cubed. And that equals 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. X to the power of a half cubed. So similar to the last question, if you have a power outside the bracket and a power outside the bracket, power inside the bracket, they multiply. So that would give you x to the power of 3 over 2. So 8 times x to the power of 3 over 2 is just 8x to 3 over 2. Okay, so that's the numerator. Like I said, the denominator is 4x squared, and there's not much else we can do with that. So we can just go straight into answering the final question. So we can go straight to the answer to the first part, which is 8x to the power of 3 over 2 over 4x squared. The coefficients, hopefully you can see, will cancel. So you've got 4 goes into 8 twice. So you've got 2x to the power of 3 over 2 over x squared. So what happens now? You've got x to the power of 3 over 2 on the numerator, x squared on the denominator. How do you bring the 2 up to the top? You have to subtract it. So that's going to be the same as 2 x to the power of 3 over 2 minus 2. How do you subtract fractions? Hopefully you remember how to do that. You can't subtract them unless they have the same denominator. So 3 over 2 minus 2 equals 3 over 2, if you multiply top and bottom by 2, 4 over 2. So 3 minus 4 would be minus 1 over 2. Okay, so that means that your answer is going to be 2x to the power of negative 1 over 2. You don't want to leave the power negative, so you bring it to the bottom. So that leaves you with 2 over x to the power of a half. And you could leave it like that, but you should know that x to the power of a half is the same as 2 over root x. And that's your final answer. Okay, so let's try the next question. Okay, question 3 is a bit more difficult, so why don't you have a go at that first, pause the video, and then restart and we'll go through it together. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on here, so as we've done before, this question is definitely worth splitting up. There's a lot going on here. So numerator, we'll call that number 1, and we'll call 27y cubed 2. So let's deal with the first part. Quite a lot going on, like I was saying. So you've got 216. Remember, split it up separately. Split the coefficient first. So 216 to the power of negative 2 over 3 multiplied by x to the power of 6 to the power of negative 2 over 3. Okay? One bit at a time. So if, like the last question, if negative a half was the same as bringing the 216 to the denominator and then making it square root, we're going to do something similar here. It is negative, so I would bring that to the bottom first. So you've got 1 over 216 to the power of 2 over 3. Okay, so it's not to the power of a half this time, it's the power of 2 over 3. So how do we rewrite that? That's the same as 1 over, so not the square root, in this case it would be the cube root of 216 squared. That is that. Okay, you need to know that. You need to know how to rearrange this to make it look like that. Okay. So we can do that in the calculator. There's two ways of doing this on your calculator. You could either do the cube root of 216 and then square it, or you could do 216 squared and then do the cube root. You get the same answer. So let's see. We've got the cube root of 216, which is 6 squared, therefore is 36. So we've got 1 over 36. Could do it the other way just to check. 216 squared is 46,656. The cube root of that answer is also 36. Okay, so that's this part taken care of. What about the right hand side? So we've got, we multiply all the way down. X to the power 6 times, x to the power 6 to the power of negative 2 over 3. So remember, if you've got a power inside, power outside, what do? You multiply. So that's going to give you x to the power of negative 12 over 3. Okay, and because that's effectively 6 over 1. We just don't put the denominator of 1 in. Okay, so 6 times negative 2 and 1 times 3. Okay, so you can see that would simplify to x to the power of minus 4. Okay, and we don't want a negative power, so we bring it to the bottom. So that's going to give you 1 over x to the power of 4. Bringing this all together, you would say that's 1 over 36 x to the power of 4. Okay, so that's the numerator done. Let's have a look at the denominator. Okay, so 27 y cubed all to the power of negative 2 over 3. Like the last question, split it up to the 27 first to the power of negative 2 over 3 multiplied by y cubed all to the power of negative 2 over 3. Okay, so we've got a negative power. We want to bring that to the bottom first, so you could rewrite that as 1 over 27 to the power of 2 over 3. The power is now positive because we brought it down to the denominator. How can we rewrite that? It's 1 over the cube root of 27 all squared. Okay, that equals that. So this, you don't necessarily need a calculator for this one. You should know the cube root of 27. Not that you necessarily know what the 27 squared is, but I would do the cube root first. The cube root of 27 is 3. 3 squared would be 9. Okay? Again, you can use a calculator for that, but just for quickness, you should recognize these patterns. The cube root of 27 is 3. Okay, so what about the right hand side? So we've got the power inside the bracket and power outside the bracket. What do? We multiply that, so it's going to give us y to the power of negative 6 over 3, okay? Which is the same as y to the power of minus 2. We don't want a negative power, we want a positive power, so we're going to do 1 over y squared. Okay, and then remember this dot, which is consistent, just means multiply. Okay. So I'm going to do 27 to the power of negative 2 over 3 and multiply that answer by y cubed to the power of negative 2 over 3. That's just the consistent shorthand version of, say, multiplication. So as we can see, that's going to give us 1 over 9y squared. Okay, but that's not the question finished yet. That's just the denominator, the numerator first of all, and the denominator taken care of. We have to bring it together now. Okay, so bringing the two answers together, we've got 1 over 36x to the power of 4 all over 1 over 9y squared. So you should remember a fraction divided by a fraction means we're going to turn this fraction upside down and multiply. Okay, so that gives us 1 over 36x to the power of 4 multiplied. So again, if you're dividing by a fraction, you're going to turn this upside down and multiply. 9y squared all over 1. Okay. When you're multiplying, you don't have to have the same denominator if you're multiplying, so we can just do top times top, bottom times bottom. We're going to have 9y squared over 36x to the power of 4. The y squared and the x to the power of 4, they can't cancel, we've got separate letters, but the 9 and 36, there's a common factor of 9. Okay, 9 goes into 36 4 times, so we're left with y squared over 4x to the power of 4. And that's your final answer. That's quite a long question, but if you take it one step at a time, it's not too bad. Okay.